Hey everyone, Benji and Igor here from the Contractor Evolution Studio.
Partnerships. They're one of the most complex, challenging relationships that business has to throw at us. Some estimates suggest that 50% of them fail within the first 2 to 3 years. However, winning the complex and ever-changing game that is business requires such a multitude of skills, of disciplines, such a diverse combination of expertise that thinking that one person can do it all is pretty frankly naive.
Furthermore, starting a business is scary. Having someone else to do it with eases our nerves and it validates our decision to do it in the first place. You think, hey, it can't be that crazy of an idea if he or if she wants to do it with me. So how do we make sense of this, right? Because going on your own seems lonely and totally unrealistic, but at the same time, by partnering with someone, you've kind of got the odds stacked against you. Now, in today's episode, we go deep with two business partners that are truly thriving and discuss how their partnership has evolved, the unexpected lessons they've learned about working with each other, and the advice they have for other co-owners struggling through the complexities of business partnership.
So Barry Hartman and Scott Foran co-founded 505 Junk a decade ago. They're innovators within their junk hauling industry, and they've devised this proprietary pay-by-weight system that utilizes these specialized scales that they've retrofitted in every truck, which allows customers to only pay for the exact weight that's on site. Pretty cool. They've grown tremendously over the last few years, opening multiple locations and hauling over 9 million pounds of junk per year. Now, one thing that they both point to is a key to success is the way that they've managed their own relationship between the two of them. It's been far from easy and taken a ton of intentional work, but 10 years later, they still trust and respect each other. They allow each other to play within their unique abilities, and they still have this rich and fun relationship outside of work. This is pretty rare, and there's a lot that we can learn from them. So, if you have a business partner, you had a business partner, or are thinking that you might ever go into business with someone, this episode is a must listen. So let's dive into it with Barry Hartman and Scott Foran. You're watching Contractor Evolution, where we unpack the systems, tactics, and skills you need to take your fast-growing contracting business to the next level.
You're here to learn what it takes to scale up, work less, and increase profitability. You've come to the right place.
Stay tuned to learn what separates the new breed of contractor from the old school, and welcome to your ultimate guide on the business of contracting. Barry, Scott, great to see you guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Boys,
Yeah,
I'm
thanks.
so excited to have you. This is going to be awesome.
Amazing. So I'm excited to dive in, guys, and talk a bit about this fascinating and complex topic of navigating business partnerships. So you guys are so interesting. You're really young, very high performing guys who have been through quite a journey together as partners and have had quite an evolution over time in the last, just under 10 years of running 505 Junk. It's of course grown to quite a sophisticated business, running multiple different locations, hauling, I think it's almost 9 million pounds of junk a year. And with that whole evolution of the company, I know your guys' relationship as friends and business partners has gone through a lot and has evolved a ton. So I'd love to start just by hearing a bit about like how you got here as partners and how this whole dynamic of your guys has evolved.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. So Scott and I grew up in the same small town, Tsawwassen, British Columbia in Canada. And we barely knew each other. And we ended up, meeting up again in college. We were studying marketing management. I had a broken ankle, and Scott was just hauling me into class every day, picking me up and giving me a ride. And sure enough, the teacher, makes us do a joint project together. And we just kind of, love at first sight, locked eyes, and boom, we were in. So, we do the project together, and I'm working on this side business plan for a junk removal company that's going to, innovate the industry by charging by weight. And so I'm 15, 20, 30 pages deep. Scotty's coming over. He's helping me on the numbers. He's got some experience in business. I have no experience in business. And one day we just kind of, we looked at each other. We're like, forget it. Let's be partners. We're doing this together.
Wow. Very, very, very interesting. So from there, how did the business evolve in its first couple of years, and the dynamic between the two of you?
Wow. We started off actually by struggling to find a vehicle. After Barry and I decided we actually wanted to become business partners, we had that interesting thought of like, okay, now what do we do? We signed off on all the paperwork. We had the business going. We're like, we have no equipment. We have no kind of like experience. We have nothing to do. So the journey kind of started off with literally getting our first pickup truck and going out and doing the jobs together. And that involved working random hours, short days, long days, and just really grinding it out until we built up enough momentum to kind of casually start upgrading our equipment and getting more hours and eventually hiring more people. It got to a point where we actually had to hire people. And that was a really good learning experience for both of us, really, is just kind of growing the company together. But that also did create some conflict as well, which is the reason why we actually ended up having to hire someone.
Tell us a bit more about that. I'm very curious to hear about the early squabbles.
We call it locking horns, and it's juicy. So early on, it was pretty straightforward. We had no capital coming into the business. We had a pickup truck that we barely got approved for financing on. We picked up a trailer on the side of the road in Chilliwack, and all of a sudden, we have a junk removal company. So it was just Scott and I in the beginning. And my favorite story, when we had our biggest blowout to this day, is we brought the table out of the apartment. We put the table in the truck, and Scott's like, perfect. We can now put more junk under the table, maximizing the space in the truck. And I'm like, no, we're going to flip the table on its top end, break the legs off, and now it's flat in the truck. Now we have more space in the truck. And we just lost it on each other. And for whatever reason, Scott saw it that way. I saw it this way. I can't remember which one we decided on, but when we got in that truck afterwards, it was not good. And that's when we realized that this partnership, we're in this for the long run. We got to work on it.
Totally. I love that. And therein lies the fascinating point, right? How two guys go from quarreling over how you load the table right side up or upside down to this point where they're running, a truly significantly sized junk hauling operation. And that whole journey in there starts with that very realization that it takes a lot of work, right? And one of the things that I find so fascinating in our general kind of business world is that our society places, so much value and so much focus around finding, let's say, like the right partner in marriage. So that's taken very seriously, but finding the right business partner and working on that business partnership really isn't. Right. And often it's as simple as like, hey, you want to start a roofing company? I want to start a roofing company. Let's get into it. Yeah. Right. But there's clearly so much more at play. And I think it's often very much underestimated. So let's come back to this. So for you guys, Scott and Barry, like this realization that it's going to take a lot of work. So it started there. Where did it take you?
Scott, I'll let you go with that one.
Yeah. There was a lot of different learning that had to happen there. As Barry said, he came in with no experience and I came in with, at least some business background. So I had like some level of experience in terms of handling interpersonal conflict in a workplace. So I spend a lot of time trying to focus on what can I learn? How can I develop better? Like what's creating this conflict? And I spent a lot of time thinking through, because at the end of the day, like a lot of this was just communication breakdowns, right? So it started off as something small. It could be something just as tiny as like stacking the table the wrong way. Like, and in hindsight, you look at that and go, how silly is that? Just because I see it one way, he sees it the other. At the end of the day, the job gets done the same way. It's about how you deliver that message. So I spent a lot of time focusing on how to get better at communicating and focusing on personal development and investing in that. And I started that journey by reading books. I started by reading books. And and learning how to better listen. And by leveling myself up and leveling, it allowed me to share experiences with Barry as well, and then encouraged him to do the same thing. And now, I mean, I don't even know how many books Barry's listened to this year, or read this year, but it's significantly more than I have. So it's just that kind of focus on personal development, which started off with just a small little thing. Is like, I want to communicate with my business partner better so that I don't fight with him anymore.
Scotty, what books, like, were there one or two that like really were kind of paradigm shifting for you at that moment that you remember reading?
The one that really pivoted my relationship initially, or at least started this journey, was a book called Judgment Detox. And what it was teaching me was, effectively, I was not really listening to Barry. You know what I mean? And it pains me to say that, but I would sense his body language and the words that he's saying, and I would make it mean something completely different in my head. And when I come into a conversation and my wall and my defenses are already up and I'm not willing to receive any form of communication, it just breaks down. Like what does he see? Right. It makes it very difficult to move forward. Let's just put it that way. So by reducing my barrier, by communicating with him better, by saying, hey, I need some space, and by being able to ask for that, it allowed us to get a lot more done and allowed us to kind of strengthen a relationship a lot more. And that really was kind of what set that ball rolling.
I just want to highlight one really neat thing that we've sort of had messaged here, but under the surface, which is this like Scott had actively realized that they're going to run into a major problem unless he works on this communication, to the point where this super busy entrepreneur
going to the bookstore.
Yeah. Right. And I think just that fact, even most business owners in a partnership, especially in an environment as busy as this contracting space,
totally,
it's not even going to dawn on them, right? So that's pretty cool. Barry, what's your perspective on that question in the early days? Like, what did you do after that realization that, holy crap, this relationship is, in business partnerships, going to take some work if this is not going to fail?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you're, I'll call it maybe emotionally immature in business. And that was us for the first couple of years. And I was emotionally immature. I was by trade, I was a professional snowboarder, and I had, no cares in the world. Breaking your leg doesn't help that. So fast forward a few years into business. One of the things I realized is that not everyone has to be like you. And, two of my strengths are we use reading and writing all the time, not Scott's strengths. Scott has a million other strengths, but from my young, naive, and incorrect opinion, that is a must-have for entrepreneurs. And it's not true. And I realized that when I started following Gary Vee a little bit online, back when, the social media boom's coming in. And this guy's running across the world. He's got video cameras on him all day. He's getting paid $70,000 to go speak at these events. I don't know how many books out he has, probably 6 or 7. All of those, like, busy, go, characteristic strengths of Gary Vee, I'm guessing, are not in line with sitting down and spending 1,000 or 10,000 hours writing a book. Mm-hmm. Surely he's got a team that is just following him around and listening, and he's just rifling off his own knowledge, but someone else is writing it. And that's when I realized that it's super important to understand that in order for not only our relationship to thrive, but our business to thrive, it's important to appreciate balance, and that we can complement each other and bring the strengths out of each other rather than expecting each other to be like one another.
That's so good, you guys. So you just talked about this concept of balance, natural strengths that are that differ, and I want to dive into that. But before we kind of go into that tangent, because it's a big one, were there other resources that you guys leaned on in those early years You mentioned books. Were there mentors? Was there a coach? Was there someone or something else that you guys used to help just like do that self-reflection, do the maturing that was needed, as you said? Any other pieces of advice or things that you guys utilized to make it through that chunk?
Myself, I also I used an app. It was called BetterHelp, and I had a counselor that I would talk to. As you know, most entrepreneurs probably know, is business can be stressful, and it can have a fairly hard. It can be fairly strenuous on yourself mentally. So I spent a lot of time kind of focusing on that. And I wanted to make sure that I was taking care of myself, not just physically by going for exercise, but I wanted to make sure I was taking care of myself mentally, because in business, if you're not mentally prepared, or if you're not mentally doing that well, your business isn't in turn going to do that well. Or your relationship, as you know, when you're stressed out, and if with your partner, either be your wife or your business partner, or even with your friends, you're not the best friend. You're not the best husband or boyfriend or girlfriend at the time, because you're stressed out. Right. So I went to counseling on my way into work every Friday, 45-minute conversation with a counselor, just to kind of make sure I was talking those ideas out, make sure she was helping me. And that's actually what led to the whole getting the book Judgment Detox in the first place. It was going to counseling, realizing that I was the one that had that problem. It wasn't Barry. I was the one that had to spend some time focusing on myself. So that was what I did.
That's awesome. And thanks for sharing. Again, another example of like doing the work required to make you the best you can be for the sake of your business. And I think that is a mindset that you guys have adopted early, and it's served you over the years. So I seriously applaud both of you guys for that heavy lifting that was done early on in the relationship. And I want to sort of shift into this next part of the conversation, which you've both alluded to over the last few minutes, which is this concept of having natural strengths that differ, right? You guys are not good at the same things. You complement each other, you round each other out. And I'd be very curious to hear, like, how did you guys initially discover this? Like, was there a moment in time when you started to notice that, hey, Scott's really good with people and really good at sales, versus, hey, Barry, I'm actually better at these other things? Like tell us more about the discovery process.
I think we had to go through what we weren't good at to discover what we could potentially be good at. And by nature, Scott's got natural skill sets around, being a hands-on person. He, since, I don't know how old you were, Scott, since you're 10 years old, you were, cleaning up, doing your renovations, building your house. Like, you just have that tangible experience. So we threw you in the operations management role, we'll call it. And I don't know how long you were in there for, but it just was not a natural fit. And we always threw me in more of the sales and marketing role, a little bit of background in snowboarding and some branding there. I'm a fairly social person, or at least I thought I was. And so, throw Barry in sales and figure that out. And we really it was almost like you didn't get that sense of fulfillment. I don't know, Scott, I'm sure you'll have your thoughts on this, but it just didn't feel right. And so I'm embarrassed to admit, it took us 7 years, and it's not something we're proud of, but it doesn't matter if it's 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, 7 years. Like, you just got to figure out where to be placed in the role, the right seats on the right bus. And once we put Scott in sales, he just took off. Not only did his personal revenue start going up, we started thinking bigger about, okay, let's get Scott in that director of sales position. We're starting to, next year, we're going to put more people, we're going to build a sales army, and he's going to coach and mentor and train everyone that comes within him. Whereas I'm not as much of an extrovert as I thought I was. And doing all this sales stuff was just draining my energy, and I wasn't actually getting that excited. I could get by because I know the industry really well, and we've got some really good connections and partnerships. So I had a lot of leverage to close deals that kind of came fairly naturally for me. So the results would say, sure, Barry's good at sales, but it was just exhausting for me. And so what I really love is supporting our management team, casting the vision and breaking that down with strategic planning and empowering the team to kind of get together and roll that out for the year. That's my strength. I could do that all day. I don't care if I'm doing it on top of a mountain, locked in a basement, or at the office with my team every day. Like, I just love it. And 7 years later, I guess we've done the switch, and we had our largest revenue growth year in 2019 and 2020. And then our net profit margins increased significantly just by putting the right people in the right seats on the bus this year. So it was a big learning lesson for sure.
It's incredible, guys. It's safe to say you got it wrong first try around.
Oh, we screwed up royally.
Oh yeah, that was a big one.
So when was that point in time that the epiphany was had and you said, hey, I'm doing this when I should be doing that, let's switch this around? Was that recent or was that a long time ago?
Oh,
Scotty.
Yeah, this is a tough one. This is close to the heart here. So like Barry said, we were in the wrong seats, right? So, and as he said, energy draining for him to be doing sales. Well, it was energy draining for me to try to coach people that I wasn't the best at coaching people on how to operate, right? Because for me, things would be common sense, but they're not necessarily common. So I was just I was getting frustrated, and I wasn't good at that particular or skilled at that particular role. So not only was I being drained of energy, but I'm underperforming, and it's impacting all the people that I'm working with. So I am not in the best mental headspace, right? So totally. I'm what, and I'm spending all this time trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? And I'm just, we actually had where the turning point came as a result was, we had an event with Breakthrough Academy, where we went away midway through the year. We went to a nice little retreat, and they have an exercise where we're doing what are called PSI tests, so personality style indicator tests. So Barry and I do our PSI tests, and we review each other's tests, and what these tests tell you is kind of like definitively what your personality style is, and kind of generally where you fit in an organization. And it said, for myself, it said, I don't like detail. I like to, have great conversations, good storytelling. I like to network with people. I like to socialize.
Does that sound familiar, Benji?
Yeah, I know that guy.
Exactly. And I'm not very good at like giving strong direction per se. It's more of like, I just like want to build relationships. I want to get along with people. And I'm coaching. I'm not even allowed to talk. I'm allowed to talk to these 5 people, not like 50 people, 5 people. So I'm like, oh man, I am such in the wrong seat. And then everyone was reviewing, like we had a board meeting. So this is a group of entrepreneurs that were sitting with us, and they were auditing our PSI tests, and they looked at us and they're like, you guys are in the wrong spot. We're like, yeah, okay. We know, we know this now. We know we need to switch. And it did take another year yet before we could actually make that switch happen. But man, was that the big change.
Do you remember reading that report and sort of feeling like, holy smokes, this has totally summarized me? Like there was a feeling of you were understood by this PSI test, and then also going like, okay, I'm clearly in the wrong spot right now.
Yeah, it was very black and white, where I was just like, this makes so much more sense. Like, this feels right.
And other people could see that about the two of you as well. Like, you had peers and mentors and other BTA members that were sort of saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. You guys should just, was that helpful to sort of have that reflection from other people to kind of confirm what you were seeing in this test?
Yeah, 100%. Like that was the catalyst that got the ball rolling, right? Was other people going, well, this, based on these results, it should be the other way around. You guys should you should be switching spots, right? So that's kind of what I
think. If I remember correctly too, Scott, so we're out in Saskatoon, and there's maybe 100 some odd people doing this exercise out in the forest, and the people with the very similar specific personality types in small groups, 5 or 10, were segmented into different pods. All the salespeople were in this pod. There wasn't any operations people. And so I think that was when we kind of realized, and a lot of friendships were formed out of that as well, because, and two friends, same personality type, like both entrepreneurs, anyways, it was really interesting to see people segmented into their own personality types. And there's a lot of aha moments at that point.
A lot of aha moments. Yeah, exactly.
And just to clarify, this catalyst that they keep referring to, this PSI assessment, for any listeners that are interested, it was developed. It's really amazing, and it was developed by this very, very smart guy called Dr. Ken Keys from CRG. So if you are interested in checking it out, just Google Dr. Ken Keys, Keis from CRG. But yeah, it's a very, very powerful tool, and this is, I've now formed companies in a number of different business partnerships, and figuring out that formula, like who is which individual, is very important, mm-hmm. right? Like in Traction, they talk a lot about it as this concept of the implementer, right? Is such a different person than that visionary, right? So it definitely is a totally different set of strengths and a different way of operating, and you really got to get the right person in the right seat.
And it took you guys years. You used tools, you had help, you finally got there. But that level of work, I don't think gets done a lot of the time. And if you look at it statistically, that would probably be why a lot of these things, I think I read a number, it's like more than 50% fail in the first 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. And it's not
the business. It's not the business so much.
No.
It's the relationship deteriorrates because of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So
and there's such a great example.
That is very eerily similar to marriages.
Totally.
I just thought of that now.
100%. Yeah.
Because we see a lot of these same principles, right? And just in this, last couple of minutes of this conversation, we can see how much work these guys have put into their relationship. So it's no wonder why it does work, but you could very easily see why for so many it doesn't work. And I say this a lot. People, I get asked this question sometimes, and this is perhaps my most pessimistic thing that I see about business, which is business is such a complex game, right? It requires so many disciplines. So tough. And to say that the solo founder, the solo owner can do it all, it does happen, but it's rare. Yeah. It's very, very rare, especially as a business is growing, right? If we think of like doctors in medicine, right? Like the orthopedic surgeon isn't the cardiac surgeon. No. So just like the sales leader is different than the operations leader. Now, if you're running, a $1 to $2 million business, it's okay, but if you want to seriously scale, you have to be good at so many different disciplines, and it's relatively rare that one individual will be that whole package. But on the flip side, you see a lot of partnerships failing.
Yeah.
Right. And is this complexity in the communication and being able to work through it. That's the key.
It's a bit of a paradox though, isn't it?
It's a huge paradox.
Right. So you join forces and you are statistically in the minority if you succeed. But if you don't, you're totally naive to think that you're going to be able to do all of that stuff your own. So
totally. But if you realize that the odds are against you, and if you realize that you're running into a headwind, then perhaps you do take the time to work on the relationship and work on the communication and go to the library and get those books and find the right counselor to work through some of these things with. I mean, it sounds crazy in the context of contracting and junk hauling.
I don't think so.
But clearly it's very, very important.
So awesome points. That leads me to my next question, which is like, what did you do with this information? You had this realization on a trip, right? You see things in a different light. When you got home, how did you guys go through the process of restructuring your roles around these natural strengths? Take us through the exercises, the tools, the conversations that were had, because I think this is a super relatable conversation. I can guarantee you there's someone listening right now who is like, man, I'm locking horns with my partner all the time, and I think there's something good here. I just want to know what to do about it. So when you got home from this trip, kind of take us from there.
Yeah, so it's interesting because at that point we already had a full team. And, I think this was maybe back in 2017, 2018. I don't know how many employees, maybe 15, 20 employees at the time. And so it wasn't just about Scott and I. We had some people that were potentially in the wrong seats, on the right bus, but the wrong seats. And so we just went balls to the wall. Like, we did personality style indicator tests on everyone in the company. Doesn't matter if you're in sales, operations, if you're a co-founder, like whatever, you're taking this test. And it was the same reaction with everyone. Holy smokes, this thing gets me. And it's interesting because it's, you get this elaborate 12-page PDF and it's automatically created, easy to do online, but holy smokes, are they accurate? And so that was our foundation for restructuring our organizational chart that we used at the end of the year to develop the 2019 year. Okay. And still do the same thing today when we get new hires coming in. We're looking to be doing the Psi test so that we make sure people are coming in. You get a pretty good idea based on personality types. So usually your gut instincts match up with the results. But you do learn a lot. And I think people learn more about themselves in a business sense, especially if they're, entering into the business world fresh out of college or just after a first job. But that really helped us structure things. So for Scott and I, personally, that's when we made that switch. We're like, you know what? Scott's in sales. One of Scott's biggest strengths is his desire to help people. So you can imagine if you're at a retail store and you have someone coming up to you that genuinely wants to help you. That's a different experience from someone that just wants to close a deal so they can hit their targets and move on with their day. We've experienced both sides. So we wanted to put Scott in that role. Now, the counter to this is the weakness that we had to be conscious of, genuinely helping people, yes, clients, but also employees in finance, in operations, in the sales center, in marketing. Scott became the everything man, and everybody went to Scott for tips and advice and help and support to the point where he was on the verge of burning himself out. So we drew a clear line in the sand. I'm surprised this wasn't in your job description, actually, is nobody can talk to you. No, it wasn't that bad.
Is this the point where Scott stopped repairing the truck batteries?
We got a mechanic, Scott repairing. Once we got to 6 or 7 trucks, I think Scott was like, I'm done. But, we drew the line in the sand. I remember doing a company email to everyone. We all love Scott, but we're going to have to leave him alone from here on out. And that was it. And so that was maybe a year ago. And Scott, maybe you can speak to the difference, like emotionally and professionally, of having that like clarity in your role.
Yeah, I definitely can. So that line in the sand is very important. And I think it's something that's really kind of important for people that are listening to understand too, is this is not like a light switch. It's not like, oh, I'm in sales now and it just starts working. There's a transition period. That transition period took us 2 revisions of our org chart and a whole bunch of different trial and error things. Like, it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. But as Barry said, we switched the role. I became a catch-all for a bunch of people, and we went, wait a second, or rather, I didn't go, wait a second. Barry went, hey, dude, you're looking a little fried here. Maybe we should kind of make you a little bit more focused. So Barry was smart enough to go, okay, we need to do a rewrite. So we did another revision, drew a little bit more clear line in the sand, and the only person that was kind of hurting themselves at that point or stepping in areas that they shouldn't have was myself. The staff weren't doing it. I was just like, oh, I'm so used to just doing that thing over there. Maybe I'll just go and do that. So it took a while for me to stop stepping over that line. So it's important to know that there's trial and error, time, accountability, because Barry had to come to me and say, stop. Don't do that anymore. And then eventually the employers are like, Scott, you don't need to do that anymore. You know that, right? You don't have to take that on. I was like, oh, okay. And eventually, after repetition, it'll stick into your head that you don't have to do that. And here's your seat in the bus, and you can actually sit in it, and you like it, and it's way more enjoyable. My energy levels are higher, like just from being able to focus on just what I enjoy more.
It's fun again.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Just to illustrate this point, because Scott said something super important that I think we really want to hammer home here, which is he talks about like drawing the line in the sand and how difficult that is. But so we hear this a lot from so many entrepreneurs, right? Especially as a company grows, it's difficult for everybody to understand where those lines in the sand are, right? So
Totally.
It sounds a lot simpler than it is, especially if you have a fairly robust team and robust structure, right? And it involves a lot of intentionality where you are outlining the deliverables and the accountabilities of everyone within the org structure, and then also making it clear who reports to who. But here's the key now is to explain that to everybody in the organization, right? So that Susie knows what Joe's job is, and Joe knows what Sally's job is, and so on and so forth, right? And because those lines in the sand are useless if you know what they are.
But no one else does. There's another layer of complexity here, which is that to make matters harder, that's not a static picture that you make once and it's done forever.
100%.
You're updating it maybe every year. People come, people go, the business goals change, the market shifts. So sometimes people, I think they have an idea that they'll draw some bubbles on a whiteboard and throw some names in it and the work is done. And it's way more of an evolving thing than that. So I'm not surprised to hear that it took a few iterations, Scott, and there will probably be more in the future. But what I'm hearing, just as some like really, really powerful key takeaways for listeners is go do a personality test, like get some data on where you guys sit on the spectrum of business strengths and weaknesses. Use that to inform what you should be doing.
And what you shouldn't be doing.
And even more important, what you shouldn't be doing. I think it's actually easier to just cross stuff off the list and then start to reorganize your roles accordingly. So for you guys, it sounds like you went from completely, you almost switched sides of the room within the company. And that's like a really fascinating story. I think a lot of people, I hope will resonate with a lot of people. I would love to hear a little bit more about what your relationship, actually, no, before we get into that, Barry, you know what I want to hear about? Because we talked a lot about Scott and sort of like your role and your skills. Just for the listeners, like what is it that you do? Like where do you sit on the org chart now? And what is your real power zone?
Yeah, good question, Benji. I don't even know if I can answer that specifically because I'm turning into the catch-all. But no, in a nutshell, what my role is to lead the leadership team. So we've got Scotty's in a director of sales role now. We've got Alex, who's been with us for 9 years now. He'll be moving into a director of operations role. He's got an operations manager. We've got our office operations manager who runs our sales center team of people. So there's and then of course, Neil in marketing as well. So we've got a group of people and we've got leaders at the helm of each division. And so my responsibility is at the start of every year, build the strategic plan, go on a retreat, build a budget, build the strategic plan, get insight from everybody, get buy-in for the big year that's coming up. And getting clear on that organizational structure. So going to the chart, revisiting job descriptions, revisiting deliverables and expectations from each individual employee, rolling those out at the start of the year. We usually do that in January, February, rolling out those updated position descriptions, updated roles, and every week meeting with the what we call a goal setting review meeting is something we took up in Breakthrough Academy. Every week I have a goal setting review meeting with each of the leaders in the company, and we check in. How are you doing personally? I'm going to pause there. How are you doing personally? I know this is business, but we're not robots.
Right.
What's going well? What sucks? I spend most of my time in what sucks. Broken system, frustrated client, My computer doesn't work. Doesn't matter what it is. We got to fix what sucks. So I like to spend a lot of time there. Quick review on the quarterly goals, which of course lead to the annual, and the 1, 2, 3 goals for the week. So how did you do last week? You hit it or you miss it, and why? And then we set the goals for the next week. So that's like a good 90% of what I do.
It's so good, Barry. And there's a set of practices and habits that you guys follow very closely now. We're going to move on to a few other questions, but it would be very interesting to know, like, how has the business accelerated since that date when you guys went, whoa, we're in the wrong spots here? Have you seen grow? I mean, I know it's easier and more fun. Has the business grown as a result too?
Yeah, we've been looking at maybe 1 year we grew by over 100%, and that sounds great on paper, but it's not as exciting as it sounds. We've been growing very steadily, 20, 25, 30% a year. I know that's called high growth, but we've got a fairly ambitious team, and you know what? The business is more predictable, not just on the top line, but on our gross profit margin as well as on our bottom line as well. And so when we focused on that consistency and stability and getting the right people in the right seats, we started seeing individual divisions performing better. Our marketing got better. Our sales got better. Our operations team got better. Our sales center started. We had 2 new sales center employees, join our team. We got 2 great people that were laid off during COVID, and they joined our team, and they're booking at over 80% on inbound sales. Like, our average as a company is 73%. There's just great people. And so the whole company is like almost the foundation's being lifted. It's not just Scott and I like putting in more sweat equity into the business anymore. The whole thing is just kind of slowly growing, month by month.
Yeah, very, very cool. That's a super neat story. Now, one thing I do want to also highlight is that these things that we're talking about, like aligning your roles, working in your power zone, those are so important and so fundamental to a good business partnership, but it's not one silver bullet either. It still requires continued work and to continue nurturing. I think that's the best word for it, to continue nurturing your relationship. On a funny point, like I remember Benji being with you in Colombia, in Cartagena, where Benji rode his motorcycle to Colombia from Canada. And if you look on a map, it's a bit of a long way. But I remember you and I were in Cartagena, and I remember within one day getting a phone call from each of you, Barry and Scott, individually, within let's say 8 to 10 hours apart, complaining heavily about each other. Right? So clearly...
No.
So clearly these problems and challenges do continue. So my question to you guys is, what do you continue to do on a very regular basis to continue to nurture your relationship, to continue to work on your relationship, whether it's in work or outside of work or whatever? Tell me a bit about what your rhythms are to keep up this great friendship and working dynamic.
Oh, that's the fun stuff. Like, that's what I really enjoy. I remember sitting down with Barry. I don't remember exactly what we were arguing over, but there was a point where we just weren't like aligned with each other for some reason. I'm not really sure again what we were arguing about. And then I remember thinking to myself, it's like, when's the last time I actually sat down and spent some time with him and like really listened to him, like just asked him how he's doing, right? Like we're not really getting audited or checked on our own emotions, and like hang out with each other wasn't really high on our priority list because we see each other every day at work. But where's that separation of like, how are you actually doing? What's going on in your personal life? Like hanging out over a beer or just have a conversation. There's a really intentional shift on our parts to make time and space for that. So now usually once or twice a month, we have a hangout. We'll literally go, we set like a couple of things we wanted to make sure, points we want to hit on. We want to make sure we talk about like how we're both doing, what's going on in our personal world, what goals that we have. And we set time aside that has to happen so that we can really just kind of chill, relax, hang out. And that's been a game changer in terms of us kind of like connecting.
Amazing. So you guys have like a set, ongoing, ritualistic rhythm to make sure that you're just spending time in your relationship, if you will, not just running around operating the business.
Yeah, 100%. And then even more recently too is like finding opportunities to like get each other involved, like outside of work activities and things that we know that each other would be interested in. Like Barry knows that I'm interested in like hands-on, like technical stuff or just fooling around with things. So I get a call from Barry. Hey, I'm trying to set up this like Bluetooth sound system for my house and I don't really know how to do this. And I'm just like, I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Perfect job for you.
Like this is me.
Oh, that's awesome. I do that with my brother. I totally get that. He's super hands-on as well. And anytime something needs to be fixed, we call Jerry and it's a blast for him.
Yeah, right.
So funny.
Yeah.
Good. Guys, I want to ask this also. So when you do even nowadays run into pretty real conflict, or let's call it even just opposing opinions on a certain decision, do we go route A or B? What's like, how should we navigate this complex problem when you guys aren't seeing things on the same page, which is normal and absolutely happens in a partnership? How do you individually, and this is a question for both of you, maybe we'll start with Barry and then let's go to Scott. How do you decide when to stand firm when you're like, no, this is really important to me, this is the way I know we should go, versus how do you know that it's time to let go and to not cause increased tension? Because that dynamic, I think I find it very interesting when in partnerships like you, that's arguably one of the most important things, is to know when to stand firm and when to just let it go.
I think you're talking about when people take the wrong exit on the highway to the vision. Seriously. We set our vision, like we rarely we rarely have conflict on the big picture stuff. And so we've dealt with the little stuff, you learn to let it go. But what I found has kept us aligned over the last 9 or 10 years is like getting really clear on the vision. 3 years out, doesn't have to be anything crazy, 10 years. Where are we going to be in 3 years? And every year we review it. We do the same thing for our personal lives. Where are we going to be in 3 years? You hash out on the values. That's the other thing. Or I prefer to call them guiding principles. And you revisit those. You just constantly revisit them. And, if I come up with a strategy or an idea or something that's veered us off the highway into God knows where, Scott's going to be like, dude, you're off the highway. Like, let's keep going towards the vision. Like, we don't need to start selling crackers and cheese out of the junk truck to make an extra $4 a job. Like, you're crazy. Terrible example, but you know what I mean? So that's one, is when we veer too far off the vision. The other one is when we know when we've breached our guiding principles. And, if we take, for example, respect, if Scott's disrespecting me or I'm disrespecting Scott, we're going to call each other out on it. And I think it's really important to just own it, apologize, and move on. It takes about 5 seconds. You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I was acting out of character. Can we move past this? Done. So I think, on the little things, you lock horns, there's no real solution because A and B both work. On the big picture, though, I think it's important to sit down and have a proper conversation.
Mm-hmm. So, go ahead,
Scott. How about you? How do you decide when to let it be and when to stand firm?
I'm a little bit more stubborn when it comes to this type of stuff. So it takes a lot of convincing. When I decide when I want to stand firm on an idea or a direction, it's almost always in fact, it's only in our big vision planning, because the vision planning is when you're deciding what off ramps you want to take and what offshoots you're going for and where your end destination is going to be. So if it has to do with the end destination, and it has to do with where the company is going as a whole, that's when I decide it's important. That's when I put emphasis on my opinion and try and make sure that there's an understanding for where I'm coming from, because that's the end destination we're going to.
So good. This has been a very, very interesting conversation to just even be a part of. We're going to wrap soon, but I wanted to just end off with kind of an open-ended question for the two of you, which would be, for someone that's listening right now that is considering going into business with someone, they've started a business and they're at that stage where they need a partner to scale up. What advice would you guys have? Simple stuff. Just what advice or insight would you share with someone in that situation right now?
I think to just get your basics checked off. You know, the first thing people always forget to do is a shareholder agreement. So, you know, step one, establish your business plan. Put some real thought into writing out your business plan. There's thousands of templates online. Go to smallbusinessbc.com and you can get access to a business planning template, and get clear on your actual model. I would also say get clear on the vision, right? Spend a day getting clear on the 2 to 3, 4, 5 years kind of thing. Making sure that your roadmap is clear, and don't skip the essentials. Set up your corporation, right? You're going to issue some shares within that corporation. Usually it's a 50-50 split. If you want to do it differently, understand the pros and cons of doing it differently, 60-40, 51-49, that kind of stuff. But assuming it's 50-50 and there's just two of you, do your shareholder agreement. You're going to have all these early conversations that are super awkward early on. You're not special. There's been millions of other people that have gone through this. Just do the stuff, I don't know. Don't skip the dishes, do the dishes and just do all the stuff that you don't want to do. It's not fun. It costs a couple $1,000s. Right. You got to work with the lawyers, but it's so important.
Scott?
Yeah. I think obviously everything that Barry said, like, make sure your legal ducks are in line there. And he did mention vision. Like, obviously make sure that the vision and direction for where you want the business to go is very, very clear. If one person wants to do this as a side gig on the weekends, another person is like, this is my full-time career, there's a clear misalignment with expectations. Mm-hmm. Make sure you are aligned on where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And what steps you're taking to get there, because that will alleviate a lot of conflict. I'd say another big thing too is realize you're both humans. Realize you both can have good days and bad days. Be empathetic to people. Empathy is huge. Understand that sometimes people have bad days, and make space for that. Make space to strengthen your relationship. And if you can't make space to do that organically, time block it. Like, as you get busier, like I said with Barry and I, as you get busier, it will be harder and harder to organically create those situations. So then block it into your schedule, make it happen. That's really, really important. And I think something else and probably the final point here is, whenever you do have a fight, an argument, a difference of opinions, whatever it may be, go back to the vision, revisit the vision, and ask yourself, well, was what we were fighting about impacting the vision that we already had alignment on? Because if it wasn't, it probably wasn't super important.
Gold. Amazing. Yeah. So many good points there in this conversation, guys. I love it. One thing I just want to wrap up with is this really big kind of underlying point that I think if we look at this whole conversation, everything that's mentioned, we realize that business partnerships are so much more complex than people see, right? And I think that the selection of a business partner, because perhaps there are some people listening to this that don't have a partner, but the business is growing to a point where they're maybe asking themselves, like, is it going to necessitate a second individual here? And I think so much of the time people really underestimate how well you got to qualify this decision. And we can see by this conversation that just unfolded here, there's so much more to that decision than, hey, this person just wants to build the same business I do, therefore we're good to go, right? He wants to build a junk removal company. I'm doing it too. We want to do it the same way. Perfect, let's be partners. But there's so much more than that, right? We can see in the way that Barry and Scott are talking, there's such a great alignment of their core values. And by the way, I'm talking like the real thing, the actual track record, not just what they say, right? So it takes time to get to know someone. So that's one thing. The second one, like you have to have opposing skill sets, right? I think we see that here in Barry and Scott, right? Like you have the visionary, you have the integrator, just their natural abilities that they have are very, very different. And that's another key ingredient, right? You don't need, if there are two spots on the team, you don't need two of the same people.
Totally.
Right? Number three, right? Their vision for the future. They're very aligned on it in business and in life. You got to have that and you got to dive into it heavy, because I've seen time and time again that in itself break apart otherwise great partnerships. And also this like steadfast dedication for the long haul, right? You can have nicely complementing skill sets. You could be aligned on core values, but if people aren't in it for the long haul together, it's also not going to work. So I would encourage anyone that is looking at a business partnership, whether to start or augmenting it into their business, to really think critically on this multitude of points. It's absolutely not just, hey, do they want to do the same thing as I do? Let's go for it. It's a very complex game. And even when you do get it right, it takes a lot of work. So that's awesome. All right, guys, it's been a fantastic discussion. I'm sure you have so much more wisdom and experience to share. If people are interested in getting in touch with you and learning more about what you do, where can they find you?
505 Junk for everything. I think we're on, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Send us a direct message and our team will put you in touch with us.
Awesome. Scott, Barry, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a very fascinating discussion. And we'll have all the details in the show notes, but I appreciate your time, guys, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
Hey, if you enjoyed this show, hit that subscribe button. It's what allows us to produce more awesome content for you, totally for free.